Hello everyone, and welcome to a guide to Painsmith on Mythic. Now, I've never really done a boss guide before, but I noticed there was a ton of nuance to this fight that's easy to overlook and essential for pretty much everyone to know. Even if your guild ends up using a slightly different strategy, I think there's a ton of different techniques and good habits you can build on this fight, and since it's really about consistency and getting everyone to the last phase, having everyone on the same page from the start can go a long way in speeding up your kill. Now to start off phase 1, we tank the boss in the bottom left corner of the room and place star, circle, and diamond markers near the center. Anyone who gets a chain simply walks out of the group and stands on their marker. This formation is important because as the tank runs out with a weapon, when it hits, the chain players will send spikes out from their current location. This creates a safe zone around the boss that we designated as home that all the players need to stay within. Alright, now let's take a look at the general flow of the fight. First, 3 players will get chained, they run to their markers. Then the tank debuff comes out and goes to the far side of the room, while the rest of the raid makes sure to stay within home or the safe zone. Everyone should then turn and destroy the ball closest to the edge. The raid should hold W and move through quickly, making room for any chain players who need to follow. If we go back real quick, it's important in later phases especially that players who can blink across the balls do so. As a general rule of thumb, these players should blink along the column or row they're currently on to avoid collision on the other side. The final mechanic of phase 1 are the traps. These haven't really changed on Mythic. You just want to place them on the edge of the platform, making sure not to overlap them, and designate one person to step on them one at a time. Maybe have one person as the designated backup if your main trap popper dies, but everyone else should never ever touch a trap. The second you think you need to be a hero, someone else thinks they need to be a hero, and this is by far the fastest way to wipe your group. For our kill, we held damage around 73% and then waited until the channel of axe number 6 before pushing over the 70% threshold for a clean transition into the intermission. It's also important to note that the edges of the room will start filling in with spikes, so you don't want to be on the rim of the platform as the end of the phase begins. Now I've gone ahead and broken down the intermission into 4 parts. The initial left-right dodge, the wall of spikes with no gap, followed by one more dodge, and then the gateway. At this point, you'll want to group up in the center, as the spikes follow a pattern of either center, right, right, or center, right, left. The individual gaps might vary by a column or two, but the overall movement across the platform will follow one of these 2 patterns. In general, you want to gain ground as the spikes pass you on both sides, and then as early as possible, determine what tiles will be safe from both the balls and the spikes. In most cases, the tile farther from the incoming spike wall is the safer option as it gives you more flexibility when dodging the fire. One good habit to build is running from tile to tile, making 90 or 45-degree turns without cutting corners. When you're on any of the lines, you're actually in multiple hitboxes, and getting clipped by the corner of a spike is probably the easiest way to die during the intermission. Lastly, you'll want to chain roars and wind rushes while staying mostly as a group to make the fire easier to dodge. The next set of spikes doesn't have a gap in it. Venthyr, Night Fae, and Mages should look to blink across, while classes like Monk and Warlock port, Pallies can bubble, and Druid, DH, Hunter, and Goblins can get around the side. Most players should have a way around this set of spikes, but if not, you can receive a bob from your Paladin and just walk through the spikes and balls. The set of spikes after the wall is guaranteed to have its gap in the dead center. This means players should look to regroup and stack at orange marker to bait fire before dodging as a group towards the Warlock gate. A few things to keep in mind for the wall. Those teleporting, especially those using Door of Shadows, there's a patch of fire that spawns as the spike wall hits the halfway point. Be careful not to directly teleport into it. If you're jumping the wall, you pretty much have to do it on the right side, as there's a set of balls that spawn on the left side. This means if the phase started out with a left dodge, it's important they have some sort of speed to get all the way back across to the right side. When jumping, you can actually get quite a bit of airtime off the edge of the platform. I like to think of it as jumping off and letting the spikes go by, rather than trying to jump around the spikes, which can get you easily clipped. Once everyone's around the wall, we regroup for one last dodge either left or right. I would recommend having one person you trust call these left or right movements throughout the phase. For the final part of the intermission, we use a warlock gateway 3 blocks from the edge. The timing is fairly tight, so you'll definitely want to use some sort of interact with mouse over. The goal is to take the gateway right as the fire is landing. Then, be sure not to move until the fire spawns in order to stack all of the adds in the exact same location. During progression, you'll probably lose quite a few people during the intermission, so I would recommend popping Lust to make sure you kill the adds and see farther into phase 2. While you might be tempted to take the gateway early, unlike the spikes, the fire can actually hit you midway through the gate. I'll also link some useful weak ores, such as a reminder to focus gateway, a player crosshair, and the timer for the fire spawns. After the adds die, we move the boss to the top right corner of the map. Chain players will move to their markers like they did in phase 1. However, one of the major differences from phase 1 is that the balls will spawn slightly earlier. In general, in phase 2 and 3, you want to hug the balls as your safe zone gets slightly compressed when the balls spawn on your side. Now let's take a look at that in action. Since the tank weapon now spawns a wave of spikes, players who get chained should look to exit the group out the sides before dodging the wave and then making it to their marker. These players will be taking damage from the chain dot as well as closer proximity damage to the weapon, and should 100% pop a personal or any hellstones to make sure they're topped and healthy before the hammer hits. The rest of the raid needs to hard swap to the ball on the edge and then run through immediately to make room for the chained players who are being chased by the spike wave. As a chain player, you want to move immediately after the spikes finish, not too early as you can die to your own spikes, but early enough to stay in front of the tank spike wave and to also signal to any players who might be blinking that you intend to go around and follow the group through the balls. Due to the timing in this phase, it's incredibly important that the ball dies quickly, as you can get a traffic jam of players looking to follow the group through before the spike wave gets there. You also don't want your tank to go into the very most corner tile of the room, as it'll take the spikes too long to travel before the balls get to the end of the platform. Just like phase 1, traps go to the edge and are popped one at a time. This is when you want to use CDs like Spirit Link, Barrier, or Devo. You'll get 2 sets of traps in phase 2 and 3 sets of traps in phase 3. So in order to line up CDs better, we held damage in phase 2 before the 40% transition point, which puts our CDs about 3 minutes apart exactly, allowing the same set of cooldowns used for the first set of traps in phase 2 to do the same in phase 3. As the final hammer goes out, again be sure not to stand on the edge, and then make your way to the center while dodging the tank wave. Also be sure not to chase the boss after he transitions, as the spikes will stay around. From here, the intermission repeats and should be handled exactly the same way as before. From here, you want to lust when the boss hits the ground, and get as much damage in as possible while cleaving down the adds. This is where things will start to get interesting, as the balls will spawn too early for the chained players to stay in the center. Once the players get to their mark, they should look and see what direction the balls are spawning from, and then proceed in their formation to the other edge of the platform. So if the balls spawn at the top of the room, the players would move directly down, staying in their diagonal at the bottom. If the balls spawned on the left side of the room, then the players would do their formation on the right side. This is why players should hug the balls, as it's guaranteed to be in the safe zone. One part that I skipped over was in this part, tanks will need a way to get around the balls, as they'll also shoot spikes. This can be some sort of blink like Door of Shadows, or an immunity, including a bob from a paladin. So to see what that looks like, our 3 chain players go to the center, and as the balls spawn, simultaneously the raid moves to the balls, the chain players move away, and the tank moves to the far corner across the balls. From here, the ball's broken and everyone moves through, the same as phase 2. A couple of things to watch out for in phase 3. Because the balls are spawning so early, you can actually get trapped between the previous tank wave and the balls spawning, so you want to avoid dodging on the very edge of the platform during the last phase. And finally, the last set of traps will come out as the boss is doing its final enrage. For this specific set of traps only, you want to place them towards the center, but not directly in it, to give yourself as much time as possible between the incoming tank wave and the enraged spikes from the edge. And that about does it. Like I mentioned before, I haven't really done any of these guides before, so if you have any ideas or suggestions, please leave them in the comments, and thanks for watching.